All right, folks are coming little by little. All right, well, my clock says 8:01, so I know more people are going to chime in as we do this, but I will put everyone on mute. We'll do that right now. Um, I'm sure we will get, I'm sure no one will need to use the chat box today because there'll be no questions that come from this talk. So, but in case you do, we got a chat box there, and yeah, excited to have Rafe come. Rafe has actually given this talk both at a class we had last winter, and then he's also done it at South Loop. And so, yeah, I just want to say, as Rafe, before I pray, that obviously Rafe's going to be teaching. We're going to be teaching from a biblical, what we believe the Bible teaches, and hopefully with lots of grace. We realize this is a very personal topic for maybe some. I mean, there may be people on this call that maybe are struggling with homosexuality when that comes up, and or maybe you have a brother or sister, a cousin, best friend. You know, so we realize this is a very personal topic here, and so we just ask that, yeah, we could give Rafe our undivided attention, and then we'll have a time for Q&A afterwards. And so, Rafe, yeah, I'm gonna pray, and then again maybe 50 minutes or so, like last week, if you can. Oh, I sent them the outline too, I think, right? I did. You got it. Okay, so let me pray, and then we'll turn it over to Rafe, and we'll go from there. So, Father, thanks again. These have been so sweet. I've been just looking forward to tonight. The last 3-4 hours, I've been looking forward to 8 o'clock at night. So bless our brother who's going to teach, who's prepared. Pray it would just be fresh for him and exciting for him as well. And then I just pray we'd all just come, God. Many of us on this call, I know our members and know you, and you know, don't know everyone, but just pray we'd come with teachable hearts, just to learn afresh and to maybe be challenged, God, and to try to think biblically. And so bless my friends on this call. Grateful for every one of them, and just, commit this time now to you in Christ's name. Amen.
All righty. Well, hi again, everybody. Man, I really hope you guys have been enjoying this systematic theology class. I think, you know, I kicked off the very first session of your Assist Theo, and I remember at the very beginning, if you remember the passage that I wanted you guys to memorize, for those of you that were there week 1, was from the book of Ezra, where it was Ezra set his heart to study the law of the Lord, to do it, and to teach his statutes in Israel. And I think I started this whole thing by just really pushing on you guys to make sure the things we learn about God, when we learn his qualities, when we learn his characteristics, when we learn about the world that we live in, that has to shape our heart. That's got to change us. And so that goes for everything we've learned. And so I hope that wasn't just an introductory, you know, week 1 comment, but I really hope everything you've taken in through systematic theology has been shaping your heart, been forming your worship. You should leave a Sis Theo class not just more knowledgeable, but you should leave a Sis Theo class deeply changed and impacted by the nature and the goodness of who God is. And so, and that goes for everything we study. And so I just want to put that as by way of reminder, for maybe a chance for you to reflect a little bit this week on how is this shaping you beyond just knowledge acquisition. Like Joe said, tonight we're jumping into a topic, biblical sexuality, which is a toughie. It's a real toughie. And there's a lot. It's not just tough because of one particular nuance of biblical sexuality. It's tough because on the whole, the Bible is very exclusive when it comes to the claims of biblical sexuality, as it is with a lot of different topics. And so there's lots of types of sexual immorality which would be out of bounds of what God would call his people to. And so whenever you're talking about exclusive claims of the Bible, you get into kind of some sensitive space. But I want to share a quick story, and then what I would like to do is just kind of give a bit of a larger disclaimer, both to everyone on here and then as well as whoever might be listening to this later on, as I know the video will get shared a little bit. So one of the practices I like to do, and I try to do quite regularly, is go out evangelizing. Actually, Joe and I were out evangelizing only a week, less than a week, maybe before COVID-19 hit, over at Millennium Park. And Millennium Park's my favorite places to go. I like parks because people are, in general, just kind of sitting out and meandering, and so you get a chance to talk to them. Well, one day I was in Millennium Park and came across this wonderful group, young group of scientists. Little did I know I was going to bump into 4 scientists who were having a conversation in Millennium Park. And man, we got into such an awesome conversation about faith and about Christianity. And it was really going. I mean, I really got a chance to put all my good apologetic studying to the test and answering their scientific questions. And then after about 45 minutes of this conversation, one of them just kind of stopped the line of thought that was going. And they started realizing, man, I was real serious about the Bible. They started realizing, every answer I was going to give them was going to be from a biblical worldview. And one of them looked at me and said, yeah, but do you believe it's wrong to be gay? And that moment, I think, and what happened, it became almost a conversation killer in the sense of, one, I had to work through, how do I respond quickly in a way that's compassionate and gentle and clear and loving and everything that I would want that I would expect Jesus would respond to that question then. And at the same time, how do I keep a conversation going where I really ultimately, I'm way more interested beyond that question. I'm interested in their souls and their relationship with Jesus. And it became just kind of a point of, how do we bridge this question? And I use that as a way of illustration. If we were kind of in a live setting, I'd have you break up in groups right now and discuss, how would you answer that in that question, in that moment? It's a good exercise to think through at some point, because you will be asked that at some point. But I use that as a bit of an illustration. The topic we're talking about today is kind of a conversation ender for a lot of people. And that's okay. A lot of topics in Christianity are conversation enders. That's okay. But I want to just kind of put out a few thoughts. Number one, everything we talk about in this topic, I want to just say really clearly, when we talk about sexuality in the Bible, when we talk about sexual immorality, we are talking about something that really is a deep vein that runs through people's hearts, the core of a lot of people's emotions, whether for right or wrong, whether because, we can say all day long, and you've heard the church talk about, we built our identity too much on our sexuality, and there's so much truth in all of that, yes. And yet at the end of the day, it really is a topic that runs down right into people's core a lot of times. And so as Christians, we have to be very aware of that. And tonight, I hope you hear in my heart and in my presentation an awareness of that. For everyone listening to this, whether this is afterwards or whether you're on the call right now, and whether you're struggling with any variety of sexual sins, whether it's pornography or maybe you're dating and in your heart before the Lord, you have gone way past boundaries you've been setting up. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe you're married and you have a history of affairs, or maybe it's something along homosexuality. What I want you to hear is that there is a gospel, there is a God who has defined what sexuality is for, but also offers grace upon grace to sinners like us. And that's at the heart of everything I'm going to talk about today. And so while there is division and difficulty in talking through this, it also isn't that difficult to talk about, because the good news of the gospel is, man, we are all works in progress. We have so much to learn, so much to gather from everybody who's a sinner like us, right? There's not any one person on this whole phone call tonight that is any more righteous than any other person. The only one who's righteous is Jesus, and he loans us his righteousness. Other than that, we all bring a whole bunch of sin to God. And so this is never a topic to look down our nose at anybody. And I'm spending quite a bit of time in the setup because I need to make sure you hear my heart first. Before we can get to clarity, which we must get, we've got to understand a compassion and a heart of Jesus that says, whoa, we're all in the same boat when it comes to this. All right, so that's my way of introduction. And I hope you hear that all the way through. Even in times when I'm going to be very clear, I hope you hear behind my clarity a compassion and being in the same boat. Sinners who have strayed from the Lord's perfect plan and have been covered by Jesus Christ. Praise God for that. This lecture is an attempt to introduce to us the biblical ethics of sexuality. In the outline I gave you, it's going to be fill in the blank. I put that outline together today. I haven't had that outline before, so I put that together today. If I skip something, will someone please let me know I skipped one of the fill in the blanks so I can go back and tell you what it was. At the end of that outline is a document I wrote. I'm not going to go through that document bit by bit today. The reason I put that together is because that was a conversation that I know Joe Riccardi and I know me have had many times as pastors with people in the church where they're living together before marriage. And people will come to me and be like, yeah, well, I don't see it in the Bible. Show me where it says you can't live together before marriage. And so I was tired of answering the same question a million times. And so I wrote that up. If you are living together right now and you are not married, I would really ask you to pray and seriously consider moving out. Me and Joe will find housing for you, more than likely for free. I think that we've done that for many couples in the past. And so please hear grace in that. We're for you, we're for your marriage, we're for the health of your marriage. But that is biblical reasoning for that. So I'll let you go over that afterwards, but that's a helpful document and a lot of Bible back there to help you guide that. Okay, let me start by, we're gonna get into a lot of topics, so let me just start going through this. We gotta recognize as we start this conversation on biblical sexuality, that the biblical worldview on virtually any topic of morality is going to be divisive and it's going to be exclusive. Jesus had a whole lot to say. He wasn't wishy-washy on a lot of topics, right? He said the way it is. And we live in a very postmodern world. You can argue postmodern if you are really into philosophy, but we live in a postmodern world. And what that means is that we live in a world where the kosher thing to say, the nice thing to say is that no matter what you want to believe, no matter what you want to do, no matter how you want to live, no matter who you want to love, and it's all good. And it's all good for society, and it's all good for everybody. And the thing that's wrong is to say that anyone else is wrong. And that's just fundamentally not the worldview of the Bible on any topic. It's just not. Jesus spoke with a lot of clarity. And as Christians, one of the things we have to really fight against, and I think you've heard this in most of the classes I've taught for you guys, is we can't be afraid as Christians to carry a biblical worldview with confidence. We're not apologetic for the Bible. We're not apologetic for what the Bible teaches on any number of topics. And the reason we're not apologetic is because we really believe it's true. We really believe the Bible is true, that Jesus is king right now. He is ruling, he is reigning, and we want to honor him with all of our life. We want to see all of life submitted to him, and we want to see his kingdom expand. And so with that, the Christian life is not just one of kind of passive acceptance of immorality. It's an important little kind of thing to have in our mind. The concept of Christianity is not, 50s America where everyone's just fine with everyone else. Whatever the neighbors are doing, it's everyone just smile and look nice. That's not the goal. The goal is to be intentional with our pursuit of Jesus, pursue holiness, and challenge every Christian who calls himself a Christian to pursue holiness, and everyone who doesn't call himself a Christian to meet Jesus for the very first time. And that's the biblical worldview, and that's what we desire to see. We want to see the gospel go forward. 1 Peter 3:15, critical verse, memorize this verse. It says, "But in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that's within you, yet do it with gentleness and respect." So first, we honor Christ the Lord as holy with our life. Every part of our life, it starts, honor Christ the Lord is holy. And then when people ask you, you have a wise defense. You have a wise reason for your hope. And that goes for questions that people will ask you. On the topic of sexuality, in all honesty, if you're living your life in the modern world in a way that's outwardly Christian, at some point you're going to get asked questions around this topic because it's everywhere. And there's a whole lot of memes out there about terrible things Christians have said or terrible ways Christians have behaved that have really hurt people in the past and that have left a mark on a lot of people's lives. And they're going to ask you, like, are you in that camp? Like, what? You're a Christian. Like, how do I associate you? Are you with those Christians that do this thing? And you do need to be ready to talk with wisdom on this topic and with love, with compassion, with clarity. So let's start. I think this is your first fill in the blank. I'm going to kind of, and just so you know, this original talk was a talk specifically on homosexuality. And I've backed up, and now homosexuality is just a part of the talk. And we're going to back up. And I realized to talk with clarity on the topic of homosexuality, which is a question everyone has thoughts and questions on, I needed to provide a larger framework on sexuality as a whole. So that's my flow. I'm going to kind of back up, do sexuality as a whole, and then move into some of the more nuances. First, fill in the blank. God has designed sex to be experienced by a husband and a wife in the context of the covenant of marriage. God has designed sex to be experienced by a husband and a wife in the context of the covenant of marriage. All sexual activity outside of the covenant of marriage is sin. That's the biblical worldview. No questions on that. So this includes everything, right? So adultery, prostitution, sex between a boyfriend and a girlfriend, sex between an engaged couple, pornography. Where do we get this from? In Genesis 2, 24 to 25, God instituted the very first marriage. So Adam and Eve were a married couple. Adam and Eve were a married couple. We read this in Genesis 2:24. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife. Right? So every wedding Joe does, he says this. He said it at my wedding when Joe married us. This is a verse that got quoted. And they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. So quite literally, sex was designed by God for marriage. And it's not a byproduct of the fall, nor is it a random, chaotic, evolutionary development, somehow detached from God's design and purpose, right? So we can just get that out of our mind, right? The evolutionary mindset that all procreation is just, this is the way evolution has to take place. No, God designed sex for a very specific purpose. It was created by God for a purpose. Among those purposes, this is a very interesting study. If ever you were interested in this, what are the purposes of it? You could do a whole day on this. Procreation, pleasure, marriage health, intimacy, and most important, an image of our union with Christ. An image of our union with Christ. So let's talk about sexuality within the context of marriage. I like to say it serves two major functions, and this is your next fill in the blank. Marriage is a mirror that reflects our union with Christ. Now, I'm making the point of why sexuality is so important for being kept within the marriage bed. Marriage is a mirror that reflects our union with Christ. Why is God so interested in sexuality? Well, one of the reasons is that marriage is a mirror. The relationship of a husband and a wife, including sexuality, that's kind of a key thing within the biblical worldview of marriage, something that takes place within a marriage. That relationship of a husband and a wife points us biblically towards Jesus Christ and his relationship to the church, right? And so the way Jesus loved the church is the way husbands love their wives. That relationship and marriage is designed to literally reflect the love Jesus has for his church and the sacrificial leadership he has for his church. We read that in Ephesians 5. No one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother. You see, he's quoting from Genesis 2 there. And hold fast to his wife. The two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I am saying it refers to Christ and the church. So what are we seeing here? The marriage covenant between a husband and a wife is a union of two people, which creates a new sacred bond in the eyes of the Lord. And that spiritual union is used to describe the church's relationship to God. Now, why is maintaining as a Christian a proper understanding of sexuality so important? Well, because you are a mirror that are pointing other people to Jesus. Your life is. When people look at you, they should be getting an accurate picture of the love of who Jesus is, of the clarity and the goodness of who he is. And so if you're choosing to live a life that's outside of his bounds for what he's designed for you, you're like a real cracked mirror. Like, who knows what reflection people are getting of Jesus in your life? If we know sexuality is reserved for marriage, and we know that that intimacy actually displays and puts on display in some ways the intimacy of Christ to his church, then to kind of rob yourself and other people of actually getting a true picture of Jesus and what that relationship is should really hurt us. It should, this last week, blessed are those who mourn. Sexual immorality should make us mourn over our own sin, that we would be a cracked mirror in that regard and falsely displaying Jesus to the world. The great purpose of our marriage is not just to have a partner to do life with, it's to reflect the marriage of Christ to his church. And sex is that intimate space where you are most intimately known and most intimately known and loved. And it's kind of in a weird way, an intimate space where, not directly, I'd be careful on drawing too close a one-to-one relationship here, but that level of intimacy is in some ways resembling of the intimacy we have with Jesus, not sexually, but he knows us fully. There's nothing that's hidden from Jesus. And there's something within sexuality, within a marriage, which points us to the intimacy of Jesus and how he knows us and how he loves us, where there's full vulnerability and we're fully known and fully loved. Second, marriage is a safety net that guards us from harm. Marriage is a safety net that guards us from harm. There's so many studies that have been done in the last few years of the sexual revolution and the scars that have been caused. The world promised, if you can just free yourself and get rid of the old confines of, what the church used to say, sex between a husband and a wife, and if you just really could be free from that and have sex with whoever you want, literally entire movements have been built on more power to have sex with whoever you want, many that are still alive today. They didn't work. They didn't work at all. Hold on 1 second. Hold on. Sorry, guys. 1 second.
We'll pause the recording. Okay.
Sorry, guys. Someone is driving in from Indiana to drop something at our house right now, and his car broke down. I just want to make sure he's okay. Okay, marriage. Am I on? Yeah. Marriage is a safety net for sex. It's only within the confines of marriage that sexuality does not end up producing long-term scars. In a non-married relationship, each partner is constantly aware of the reality. Now, this is important. My wife and I used to teach the Foundation of Biblical Marriage class for marriage prep at Park, and my wife would do an excellent job teaching this section. When you're having sex outside of marriage, what happens is you're allowing yourself to go into a space that is most intimate, where you're being most vulnerable with another person, and you have no guarantee that that person is not going to leave you the next day. That's kind of the point of dating, right? Like you're not locked in yet. When you're dating, you can get out at any time. And in a weird way, when you bring sex into a relationship where the other person can get out at any other time, sex can become very abusive, because you're always wondering, am I living up to some kind of standard? Is the other person pleased with me? That's such a broken worldly view of sexuality. But there is some kind of natural way that actually plays itself out when you're having sex in a non-committed relationship within the covenant of marriage. Within the covenant of marriage, that is completely gone, because you covenanted with another person who says, I'm not going to leave you. I love you. Like I'm in this for the long run. And the goal is not that you have to keep living up to some standard. The goal is I love you. But that's not the case with dating. And so in some ways, very directly, marriage serves as a safety net for that unique thing called sexuality. In Hebrews 13:4, we read that marriage are held to be in honor, are to be held in honor, and the marriage bed kept pure. So just a few verses for us. Hebrews 13:4. Let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled. For God will judge the sexually immoral and the adulterous. Galatians 5:19. We read that sexual immorality, that's the Greek term porneia, where we get our word pornography from, is a work of the flesh. In other words, sexual immorality is not of God. So all sex outside of marriage, that was the concept of porneia in that day. That was the understanding of it, is outside of God. It's a work of the flesh. Those who have placed themselves under the authority of the lordship of Jesus Christ, they are to flee sexual immorality. The picture there is actually, let me read the verse. The works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, and sensuality. That's works of the flesh. The idea of fleeing sexual immorality, one of the ways that I think the modern church is, we got so comfortable with so many kind of pet sins, and we don't call them out. There are certain sins we really like to call out, and then other sins and other things that are just kind of normal, right? And we don't really call out that much, or we just kind of accept it. But really, that shouldn't be the case. We should be fleeing from sin, not kind of cozying up and cuddling sin. And it really is a shame when the church does the opposite. Hold on. I want to make sure my computer's charging. Oh, my computer. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, I know I'm ruining the recording. 1 second. There we go. Now it won't die. We should flee sexual immorality. If you remember the story of Joseph in Egypt, right? When he was tempted into a situation where he would be potentially having sex with a woman who wasn't his wife, he fled. He got out of there as fast as he could. And there should be a sense of that we want to honor the Lord to such a degree that we would flee tempting situations. You know, there's actually an entire book in the Bible, Song of Solomon, that deals with sexuality. So God knew that this was a part of human life. And there's a whole book in the Bible that is well beyond R-rated, and it is about sexuality. There's a wonderful sermon series, by the way, by a guy named Tommy Nelson that walks through Song of Solomon, 6-part sermon series. I send it to every couple that I do a wedding for. If ever you want to walk through that, it's really, really helpful. Let me read to you from Song of Solomon 2:7. He says, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field. This is how Song of Solomon's written, right? By the gazelles or the does of the field, that you do not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. What's he saying there? He's saying, don't have sex until marriage. That's what that means. He's saying, I adjure you, young women, do not sleep around before you enter into a marriage relationship. Pastor John Piper, who many of you guys know and have heard quoted before, he comments on this refrain and basically just says this whole passage is a very cautionary passage that's filled with beauty and hope, and it's supposed to be life-giving. It's supposed to be protective. It depicts a picture of marriage that's so lifted up and held in beauty. It's like, wow, that's where I want sexuality to be experienced. I want it to be in a way that's life-giving, not life-draining. I want it to be in a place that serves a relationship for the long haul and not just leaves scars behind. That's what Song of Solomon gets after when it's talking about sexuality. And listen to what Song of Solomon says. Song of Solomon 2:15. Catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that spoil the vineyard, for our vineyards are in blossom. What an interesting little verse. Catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that spoil the vineyards, for our vineyards are in blossom. What's he saying? He's saying, don't let little foxes come into a vineyard too soon and destroy all the fruit that could be produced in that field. In other words, when you have sex outside of marriage, when you start pushing up against those boundaries and you go past your boundaries before marriage, what you're doing is you're letting little foxes in. And what you're doing is ultimately you kind of destroy the fruit that field was supposed to have in the long run. Rather, what you should do is keep the foxes out, because that field is going to produce incredible fruit. If you're called into a marriage and you save the marriage, you save sex for marriage. And for those of you that have already gone past that line and you recommit yourself to Jesus and you say, today, I'm going back. I'm going to commit myself to honoring the Lord, and we're going to do this the right way. There's so much fruit to be had within marriage when it's done the biblical way. Marriages last longer. Marriages are happier. Sexuality is better. Those are all statistical when couples choose to live this way. And Song of Solomon said it before Jesus' day even. Keep the little foxes out. God is not a cosmic killjoy. Rather, he is good and wise, and he knows what is best for us and what is most honoring to him. God has made us as sexual beings, not as a root identity of who we are, but as part of our human experience. And sexuality can, if practiced outside of God's design, cause serious long-term harm, psychologically, emotionally, physically. It can actually just, if you have bad sexual experiences, it can cause you to have disorders with yourself, of how you treat yourself and what you think of yourself. And so we want to honor them. We want to honor the Lord well. What I'd like to do is take a little bit of a side here and have a brief conversation on pornography. Now, when I taught this class last, it was to a group of men, and I recognize I'm speaking to a group of men and women. And so I've modified this section just a little bit I hope this is appropriate, but the more I read about pornography usage, it's not quite as common, but it's increasingly common among women. And that wasn't the case only, not that long ago, but increasingly pornography usage is used by women as well as by men, both within the church and without the church. So here's a fill in the blank. Satan uses pornography to steep God's people so deep in sexual sin that they become insensitive to the reality of its consequences. Satan uses pornography to steep God's people so deep in sexual sin that they become insensitive to the reality of its consequences. Of all the issues that the church faces today, I'm really convinced pornography is right at the top of the list of things that are causing serious, major disaster on our people. I think a lot of the reason why there's weakness in the church, a lot of the reason why some of us don't really feel like we're growing in our faith and feel like wondering why we're kind of in the same ruts and the same rhythms, I think ultimately it comes down to a saturation of pornography within the church. I've gotten a chance just to counsel a lot of people who have struggled with this. I know this is a major struggle for a lot of people in the church. So if this is you and you're hearing this, hear grace upon grace from the Lord Jesus Christ. He forgives sinners like us, right? There's grace for every sin and everything. But I also want to challenge you. The Lord gives full victory. If you're a Christian, the concept of what Jesus went to the cross for you for is not that you would struggle with the same sin for the rest of your life. We will always be sinners until the day we die, and then we get our glorified selves and we won't be sinners. But the idea is not that we're always in the same sin. The Lord gives victory. And it a lot of times it's not simple. It's not just a snap of the fingers and, hey, you're past whatever the sin is that you're dealing with. But he gives full victory. I want you to hear that. And he can completely move you past if you're stuck in cycles of using pornography. I want you to understand how bad pornography can be. There's a saying in 1 Timothy chapter 3. It says this is talking about the requirements for elders. It says, the saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer, an elder, must be above reproach, the husband of one wife. Interesting language right there. Sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, and he goes on. The language of a husband of one wife, that's the actual language there that's used. It says a one-woman man. That's the language that's used in the Greek. So he must be a one-woman man. Now, in that day and age, every good woman, what was considered a virtuous woman, we'll put it that way, every virtuous woman was a one-man woman. That was what was normal. A woman married a man, she was a one-man woman. She gave herself completely, in terms of sexuality, to her husband. That was it. There was no one else. If you strayed from that, that would be abnormal in those days, or it wouldn't be considered virtuous. However, a virtuous man was a many-woman man. See how creepy and weird this is already? That was the language that was used. He was a many-woman man. And so it was not uncommon for most men to have their wife, their primary partner, but then to have many other women, to visit brothels, to have prostitutes. I mean, that was just kind of the norm of the culture. And when the church came along, basically the church said, not in the church. That is not how it's to be. You've heard one man woman. That's how it should be. You should be a one man woman. In the church, it's also a one woman man. It's also a one woman man. Now, this speaks to both the men and the women right now. That passage is for men aspiring to be an elder, but I want you to hear what the norm, what should be guiding our people is. What pornography does is it kind of brings the world of a harem and a brothel into the privacy of your home. And it's basically the same thing. I know I wouldn't put it in the category. People have said, people have asked me if they can get a divorce because their husband is using pornography. I would not at all say that. It is not equated to the exact same thing by any means. So don't hear me on that line. But I am saying in some ways, it's kind of the same thing. what we've done is we brought the sexual experience that was made for a husband and a wife. And then what we've done is we've expanded it to become many women men, or many men women, into the privacy of your home, and no one has to know about it. You don't even have to go to public. You don't have to go to the brothel to do it. You just do it in the privacy of your home. And really, the church should just be adamantly opposed to this. As Christians, we have to recognize it for what it is, and we have to really weed it out and pray over it and support each other who are stuck in patterns of sin, and know deep down that God has called us to something more. Biblical sexuality works for marriage. And pornography, there's nothing like pornography that will really bring in harm into your marriage. And so for those of you that are single, I just want you to know, don't think that, man, when I get married, pornography will just go away. That I haven't seen that pattern play itself out in the life of the church and the people I've counseled. Today is the day to get victory over that. Don't wait any longer. And to those that are already married, and that if that's still an issue in the home, get good care. Talk to your pastor, talk to deacons. There is victory to be had, and and you should be pursuing that. There's also grace to sinners, like every one of us on this phone call. Okay, that's my pornography excursus. Another bit of a side note. Man, I'm going long again, so I apologize. The Bible celebrates singleness. The Bible celebrates singleness. 2 verses here. This is something we don't talk about enough, and I really want to make sure we understand this. Singleness is not a less than in the biblical worldview. In fact, for Paul, it was considered, he actually said, I wish you were all like me, single like me. Now, concerning the matters, 1 Corinthians 7, concerning the matters about which you wrote, it is good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman. But because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife and each woman her own husband. So he's saying it is good to be single. But if you're overcome by temptation, it's not a sin to get married. Get married. Of course, that's good. 1 Corinthians 7, now as a concession, not a command, I say this, I wish that all were as I myself am, referring to his singleness. But each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one to another. In other words, Paul advocates singleness in a very special way. Your pastor, Joe Riccardi, is a single man. I am a married man. I have 3 kids, and I can just tell you the level of ministry and work that Joe is able to do as a single man is incredible. He has a different schedule that he is able to do, where I am oftentimes committed to my children during some of the hours where Joe is able to be out ministering and spending time with people and sharing the gospel. And that's a real thing that happens within marriage. And so I just want you to hear, singleness is celebrated, and definitely a conversation I have often. Do not race out of singleness into a marriage you are not confident about going into. Please hear that. Do not think getting married will solve your problems. If you go into a marriage where it is ill-advised, or you're not confident or sure about it, just to get out of singleness, 1, that's not a biblical worldview, but 2, it will cause more problems than it will actually fix. Okay. Engaging with our world. How do we engage with our world on the topic of sexuality? Number 1, we want to avoid oversimplistic responses when discussing sexual sin. We want to avoid oversimplistic responses when discussing sexual sin. You know, going back to that story about when I was sharing the gospel at Millennium Park with the 4 scientists, so many bridges have been burned because of oversimplistic ways of communicating difficult topics. Kevin DeYoung, he wrote this piece a while ago that I found so helpful. I'm going to read it to you right now. And he was talking about how do we as Christians communicate to those in the LGBTQ lifestyle. He writes this. He says, if we're speaking to cultural elites who despise us and our beliefs, we want to be bold and courageous. If we're speaking to strugglers who fight against same-sex attraction, we want to be patient and sympathetic. If we're speaking to sufferers who have been mistreated by the church, we want to be apologetic and humble. If we're speaking to shaky Christians who seem ready to compromise the faith for society's approval, we want to be persuasive and persistent. If we're speaking to liberal Christians who have deviated from the truth once delivered to the saints, We want to be serious and hortatory. If we're speaking to gays and lesbians who live as the scriptures would not have them live, we want to be winsome and straightforward. If we are speaking to belligerent Christians who hate or fear homosexuals, we want to be upset and disappointed. Kevin's words are really wise. And I think what it paints a picture of is that there is not a one size fits all response to the LGBTQ conversation, to the sex before marriage conversation, to the adultery conversation. Sexual sin requires complex Christians who know how to handle themselves, who do it with tact and love and boldness where needed, but direct as well. Matthew 10:16 says, "Behold, I'm sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." What that means is we got to understand this thing. We got to be wise, and we got to approach the world with wisdom. Let's talk specifically about homosexuality for a bit. I've specifically not handled homosexuality first, and what I want you to understand is sexual immorality comes in many forms, right? We talked about pornography. We talked about sex as engaged couples or as dating. And homosexuality is one form of sexual immorality. I'm not going to go through every verse just for the sake of time, but let me just quote from 2 verses. Romans 1, we covered Romans not that long ago in the sermon series. Romans 1, 26-27. "For this reason, God gave them up to their dishonorable passions. For their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error." Basically, in that verse, Paul's saying they started practicing homosexuality, and there were scars and wounds that came from that, emotion, like all types of pain that came into their life because they deviated from God's plan for them. And God says in Romans 1, he allows people to go into the natural consequences of their sinful behavior as actually an expression of his wrath upon sin. 1 Corinthians 6, 9-10. "Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived, neither sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality, nor thieves, nor greedy, nor drunkards, nor revelers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God." So in there, you see that we have listed a number of different sins, and this should make everyone nervous, right? Look at this language here. You've got thieves right next to greedy. So don't say you're off the hook, right? Don't say you're off the hook. But notice in there, you got sexually immoral, and you do have homosexuality. So 3 things we can learn from that passage. Number 1, homosexual sin is serious. It is serious. Number 2, homosexual sin is not unique, right? Those who are same-sex attracted should not be ostracized, treated as lepers. What a terrible history of the church we have sometimes that we do this to folks that are same-sex attracted. And it's almost like there's an ostracization. It's like we totally permit divorce for any reason. But homosexuality, you're going to be an outcast. What is that? That's not the church. Sin is sin. Let's call sin what it is. Hold it for the level it is. It's an affront to what God's designed. It is serious, but it's not unique. Look at the list that it falls right in the middle of. It's right next to greedy, right? Also, homosexual sin is not inescapable. It's not inescapable. The passage goes on to say, "And such were some of you." Here's a list of all these sins, homosexuality being in them, and such were some of you. I want you to know, if you're listening on this, and maybe you're same-sex attracted and you're listening to this, we have a number of folks in the Park Community Church family who are either same-sex attracted and choosing to remain single for the sake of Jesus Christ, for the glory of God, recognizing that God created marriage for a relationship between a husband and a wife within the context of marriage. Very difficult decisions, people who have really struggled with this and come to a decision where they're joy-filled, living obediently to God's commands. And man, oh man, do we come alongside them in that. And we have others that God has fully delivered them. People who are deep into the LGBTQ lifestyle. I mean, I'm talking deep into that lifestyle, who God has completely delivered and are now in wonderful marriages, men to women, women to men. And the Lord has, and such were some of you, but God wrote a new story. And so if you're listening to this and you're wondering where to even begin that journey, I just want you to know there are some incredible resources in the Park family to walk that journey with you. Pastors, deacons, myself and Joe would love to talk to you and counsel as best as we're able to. How do we handle ourselves in this conversation? Number one, I'm going back to that story. I'm discussing with the people, the scientists in the park. How am I thinking of composing myself? What's coming to my mind when I'm thinking through this? Number one, I always commit to the lordship of Jesus. We don't back down on that topic. Sometimes I think Christians, modern day Christians, we've kind of bought the whole postmodern worldview, and we're so afraid to say we're Christians. We're so afraid to take a stand. And that is so unbecoming of Christians. It's really not the Christian life. It's very confusing for people. We commit to the lordship of Jesus. Let people know. And if they want to be offended, they can be offended. But if you do it right, and if you're living a life that honors the Lord, they're probably not going to be that offended. They might think you're weird, but everyone's weird, right? I'm weird. Everyone's weird. Joe's really weird. I mean, I'm kidding, Joe. I love you, Joe. Commit yourself to the lordship of Jesus. You shouldn't be looking for a way to avoid a conversation about Jesus. Commit yourself to the lordship of Jesus. I'm not looking at all these chats right now. I'm going to stay on focus. Commit yourself to the lordship of Jesus. Number two, love sinners like Jesus did. You know where you always found Jesus? Hanging out with tax collectors and prostitutes. I mean, the guy he'd go to all the wrong parties. And you know what? What's interesting, sometimes in our church, if you went to the types of parties Jesus went to, we might think about putting you under church discipline. What happened to us? How did we get away from this? This is really not good. It's good to have a church family. It's good to have brothers and sisters that lift you up in the faith. And it's good to be around people that don't know the Lord, that are in very different lifestyles than you. Jesus did it. Let's be like him. And he didn't sacrifice his morals to be there. He had such a way about him that he could enter into broken places and bring the light of the kingdom of heaven with him. And they were compelled to him because of his difference. Remember, people that are in brokenness and darkness, they're well aware of the fact that their life is not going well for them. When Jesus was going into dark places, it's not like the people were like, woohoo, my life's awesome. They're aware of the fact that there's struggles in their life. And when someone goes in there with the joy and the heart and the life of Jesus, and they want to be just powerful witnesses for Jesus, it's just good. And so, Park, can I just encourage you? We got to learn how to be like Jesus and associate with people who are, they haven't been to a systematic theology class before. Okay? It's the world. Let's be the church. Let's be the light. We got to love people like Jesus. And remember, right? Avoid self-righteousness. You're a sinner too. It's not like they're really bad sinners and you're not as bad sinners. Whoa, that's not the gospel. Remember, Paul called himself the chief of sinners? I don't think he was just being hyperbolic. He was saying, I get it. I know what it means to be blessed as the poor in spirit. He truly saw himself the chief of sinners. So see yourself that way. And that might change the way you communicate with people. Number three, this is kind of digging into last week's talk. Know the enemy and his tactics, right? Ephesians 6, spiritual warfare. We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against rulers, authorities, cosmic powers. I came across this fascinating little cartoon. I put it in Appendix A at the end of your little thing, the outline I gave you. And you can see it's called The Descent of the Modernist. And you can see people, they start at the top of Christianity, and then they take that first step. The Bible is not infallible. It's like, okay, you know what? And honestly, I can tell you, I've literally seen this play out with my own eyes. I've watched friends. I'm telling you, when I was in college, I had a group of friends. I was a rookie Christian when I was in college. I really didn't know much. I remember looking up to these guys and these women who were like, I remember thinking, I could never be as knowledgeable of the Bible as you. This whole world of Christianity, like, you are deep. I did not know that was a thing. And today, a number of them, I would truly say, have walked very far away from the faith I knew that they had, or I thought they had when they were in college. And how did that start? Starts when you start saying, maybe the Bible's not infallible. Maybe the next step, maybe man's not made in the image of God. Maybe that was kind of like an old thing. You know what? The miracles, I've heard some explanations of, why the miracles, and you start going down, and before you know it, you've watered it down, and the Bible doesn't have anything to say anymore. And you got to stop that at the first step. As Christians, don't let Satan get in. We hold to biblical inerrancy, and we're not looking for ways to get around difficult passages. That's not what we're trying to do. We're not looking to do theological gymnastics to make the Bible say something it doesn't say. We're not looking to compromise. That's not what we're trying to do either. We're looking to hold the line. We're Christians. This is how we're supposed to live. This is what's best for society. We love people so radically, and we do have an exclusive view on a lot of topics, and that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And so hold the line. You honor the Lord as holy, and know that Satan wants to get you to start watering down the things you believe, and we've got to avoid that. Next, win the person, not the argument. Win the person, not the argument. When you're talking to people, and remember that Kevin DeYoung quote that I said earlier, and there's no one size fits all, but sometimes you can get in conversations with people, and I got to be careful of this. I do this a lot, I think, where I really, because I like a good argument, I like debating, but I can kind of get into a space where it's like, man, I'm not really concerned for your soul right now. I'm really interested in showing you I'm right, and you haven't thought about your position enough. There's some good in there. Paul debated, definitely. He wanted to persuade people, absolutely. But the Christian worldview is such that we have this deep passion for people's souls. We want to see them come into a saving faith relationship with Jesus. You don't want to water down the gospel. And you got to make sure that when you're communicating with people, you're doing so in a way that's clear, but hungry to see their soul come to know Jesus. I put together a few Q&A questions at the bottom of this, just because I've answered these questions so many times. Joe?
Great. Yeah, no, well, I think this is great. These are kind of probably 4 good questions to start with, and then we could take some other questions too. So I think this would be great. You're kind of like, you're starting the Q&A. So I might try.
So I guess in terms of, let me make sure that's nothing. Yeah, that's that's most of the actual material. I'll just kind of close in a little bit. But
yeah, do that. You want to close and then do the questions? Yeah.
Okay, so let me close it out first. There's a whole bunch of stuff I left off, but I think this gives you kind of a dive into things. Let me finish in the place I started. We want to love people. We want to love Jesus first and foremost. You're a Christian. Have your affections stirred by the goodness and the greatness of our Trinitarian God. Jesus Christ is King. He's King over your heart. You should love the Word, right? Blessed are those whose way is blameless, who walk in the law of the Lord. Blessed are those who keep his testimonies, who seek him with their whole heart, right? Psalm 119. That should be the stir of your heart, to know his law, to know his rule, and to live it out. And you should desire everyone else to be doing the same, because that's what's best for them. But you want to do it in a way that's aware that, especially when it comes to the topic of sexuality, you are wading into waters that strike at people's deep heart. And as Christians, we should seek to really love people well in this conversation. So I'm going to answer a couple of key questions. I know I get these a lot. These are ones I've wrestled through personally. And again, I want to just humbly submit to you, you might come to different conclusions than me, and that's okay. None of this is easy. And so the first question is, should I attend a gay wedding? Let me just start by saying, my heart breaks over this scenario. The Christian's aim is to love people boldly and fully, even in their sin. At the same time, it is not the Christian's aim to celebrate or affirm sin. And these two tensions, frankly, were perfectly balanced by Jesus. He loved sinners enough to dine with them while never affirming their sinful behavior and always calling sinners to repentance. So remember, we are always the first of sinners that need to be called to repentance, but there's this weird tension there. We want to love people and yet call them to repentance. With this question, we must first realize that from a Christian perspective, a wedding between two people of the same sex is not a wedding in the eyes of the Lord. It's not a marriage. In the eyes of the state, it might be a marriage, but in the eyes of the Lord, it is not a marriage. There's no sacred union that's actually taken place. I know that's probably very difficult to hear for some that have not really thought through this at this level yet. But a marriage in the eyes of God is between a man and a woman. That's the clear teaching of the scriptures. God created marriage. in its design, it's to give him glory, and marriage is supposed to be following his design. This does not mean that only Christian marriages are valid, right? So it's not like two Hindus that get married, a man and a woman that are Hindu, that marriage is not a valid sacred union. We would say marriage is a common gift of grace to all humanity between man and a woman. However, it is between a man and a woman. So as we seek to love sinners while boldly honoring Jesus, we must consider what attending a gay wedding would mean and would communicate. Some people have drawn a hard line and have stated that to attend a gay wedding is to celebrate and to affirm. And for that reason, they said, I wouldn't be able to attend because I don't want them to think I'm affirming or celebrating this. Others have come to a place where they've said, you know what, I feel like it's my responsibility to go, but I want to make sure I have a conversation with them first and make sure they understand what my attendance means, that I love them. I'm for them, but I'm not for this union. And those are oh man, is that an uncomfortable, difficult conversation. I recognize that this is just about as uncomfortable a situation as anybody could be in, and it's difficult. My personal feeling, my personal stance, and this is not Park's stance, my personal stance is I don't think attending the wedding would be fruitful or helpful, but I don't think there's agreement on that among the Park staff. I've had to wrestle through this and counsel a number of people through it, but it does take wisdom. It takes knowing the relationship and praying and asking wisdom from the Lord. Number 2, is it okay to hold personal convictions against homosexuality but still celebrate gay rights? The answer to this is yes and no. And again, I'm trying to answer as best I can. These are questions I've thought about a lot. On the one hand, there is an idea deeply woven into the LGBTQ movement, which similarly was earlier woven into other movements, like the origins of the feminist movement, for example, that all people are made in the image of God. And the LGBT community has had a long history of abuses to them. There have been severe, hate crimes done to the LGBTQ community, and that is such an affront to the glory of God. No person should ever have a hate crime committed to them. And so the idea that all people are created with value and dignity and worth, that's a Christian principle. And we would affirm anything that is advocating for that. On the other hand, Christians do not believe that the LGBTQ lifestyle is God-honoring, that practicing the LGBTQ lifestyle is what God has designed humanity for, or that it's good for society. And so what we would typically say is it would be very difficult to, in my inner hidden life, say, no, I believe God's way is best, right? So imagine this. I believe God's way is best. Sex is for a marriage and a man and a wife. It's for marriage. I don't believe that homosexual marriages are designed for the blessing of society, and that's how God's ordered things. That's what I believe internally. But then when I go out and when I make my vote known, or when I say what I think is good for society, I'm going to speak differently. That would almost be like hypocritical, right? Like I believe one thing internally, but then another thing externally. And that's just not the Christian mindset. Christians are called to be single-minded in all our things. What we believe internally about Jesus is true for the whole world. He's king, not just if you believe it or not. And his way is good for us and for society, whether we choose to believe it or not. And so my response to that would be, I think that Christians should be single-minded in how we follow Jesus and what we think about his laws for our life.
I think the question, what would you answer the question if it was, is it okay to hold personal convictions against homosexuality but still celebrate a gay person? Not gay rights, let's just say a gay person. So someone on this call, let's say someone on this call is a best friend, or whatever, or brother or sister. How would that change? Is it possible to celebrate that person, you think? And I guess this defines what celebrating means, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by celebrate that person. If what you're saying is affirming a lifestyle, an LGBTQ lifestyle.
Yeah, I'm not saying that.
It would be in the same realm, Joe. I would answer that the same way I would say to someone who is sleeping with their boyfriend or girlfriend before marriage. Would I celebrate anyone who's sleeping with their boyfriend or girlfriend before marriage? I would say to them, no, God's called you to something very different.
Well, to trust in Christ, you would say. I mean, I'm trying to think. Last night, right? The biggest television series right now in the country, the world, maybe is Michael Jordan, the series that's going on about him and the Bulls, and and I don't want to, I'm not going to pick on Michael here. I've never known Michael to be a professing believer, whatever is it possible to hold personal convictions against sex outside of marriage, but still celebrate Michael Jordan and say, because now you're celebrating him as an act. Can you separate those two? You think, like, celebrate this person in this case as I don't know. That's just a question. I'm wondering when can you celebrate a person, but not celebrate, the whole country celebrating Michael Jordan right now. Is that?
I'm not quite sure I'm following the question, Joe.
Okay,
You mean just like
question? We'll keep going. I got to do a better job of clarifying, but let's keep going. Let's go to the next question.
I'm not sure if I wrapped that question up. I'll move to the next one.
Yeah.
Can a practicing homosexual be a Christian? The answer to this is yes and no. And let me make sure I clarify on that. We are all practicing sinners. Okay, so let's just get that out straight. Everyone on this phone call is a practicing sinner in one way or another. And so the answer to that is, can you be a practicing sinner and be a Christian? Well, I hope so. Otherwise, I'm in trouble. There's sins that I know God is working on me through, and Lord willing, years from now, I will be well past those sins and on to new ones. So are there people who are currently practicing homosexuals who have truly trusted in the Lord Jesus Christ? There's a number of ways to come at this. Number one, if someone, when I came to faith in the Lord Jesus, I used to drink a ton of alcohol. Just a lot. Drunkenness was a major sin of mine. I came to faith just before going to college. Through a good portion of college, I was drinking a lot of alcohol and really got conviction my junior year of college. I believe I was saved my freshman year, but the Lord did some work on me. It took some time. It took a couple of years, actually, where I was having people that were giving testimony, and I was seeing stories and life transformation. Finally, the Lord used a very pivotal moment in my life where I was just confronted with the reality of sin, of drinking in my life. I think that can be a journey for a lot of people who are in sexual sin of any number of sorts. Their faith is very real, and God's got them on this journey. I do want to be very clear. The Bible does say, there is very clear language. Neither, these types of sinners will not inherit the kingdom of God. I'm not trying to downplay the sin, but I am saying I know that sin and overcoming sin can be a journey. I also know that we live in a very complicated world. In the South Loop, where I'm a pastor, and I'm sure in LP as well, there's a number of churches that are gay-affirming churches that literally teach the opposite of everything I've just said today. And what I would say is they are doing fascinating theological gymnastics to make some kind of a presentation because the Bible is fundamentally clear. And so, but then I start thinking about, what about the people who are in those churches and they're being deceived? And there is a genuine faith. And so, and I don't want to, I don't want to start drawing those lines. What I would say of who's saved and who's not, I want people to have a faith in Jesus, and I do want them to be in churches that honor the Lord Jesus and are really teaching the truth. I think there could be a lot of people who have bad teaching on this right now. And I would pray that they get good teaching on it at some point in their life.
Rafe, what I would add there too is, the question is if you're born again or not. So if you can, exactly. To be a Christian is you're either born again or you're not born again. So can you be a born again Christian and a practicing homosexual? The question I think you could just more generally phrase the question, can you be a born again Christian and be an unrepentant sinner?
That's the last category.
Yeah, okay. Because if you're unrepentant on anything, so if someone on this call is like, I live with my girlfriend, Rafe, and I love you, I'm at your church, but leave me alone. Like, I don't want to, you're not going to talk to me about not living with my girlfriend, having sex with my girlfriend, Rafe. I'm sorry. Rafe would have equally, or I would have equally concern, like, bro, like, I am concerned biblically that you're a Christian, because you're not expressing, you're not demonstrating what the fruit what a genuine Christian would be demonstrating right now, what it means to be like, oh, Rafe, I didn't know that. Really? I'm not supposed to, okay, I turn, help me. I'm struggling. I turn. But when it's leave me alone, no matter what the sin is, it's more broadly. That's what I would say is I'd be concerned. Like the passage I put in there, 1 John 3, John talks about if there's a pattern or sin, if there's a practice of sin, 1 John 3 talks about, meaning we're all sinners, but if there's this practice of leave me alone, I would be concerned for anyone, whether it be someone who's an adulterer, and you leave me alone. I sleep around with my wife. I don't care. Joe, I'm a member at your church. I'm concerned for your salvation. Or I'm gonna leave my wife. I'm gonna go sleep with another woman. I'm gonna leave her. Bro, you're not showing yourself a Christian. Leave me alone. I don't care. I'm concerned for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And a great verse there is Romans 6. What shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? By no means, right? And so the idea, if you're unrepentant over sin, then really the question is, have you really been born again? Is Jesus Lord of your life, or is he just a tack on and you're Lord of your life and you just are trying to live it the way you want to live it? And so there's a number of different categories there.
And my buddy Sean King, who's on this call, clarified, he knew what I was thinking, so he expressed it better. My question was, maybe this is the best way to say my question. If Michael Jordan was homosexual, would it still be okay for us to celebrate him as the greatest basketball player of all time? Like homosexual, he was public about it, whatever. And is it okay to celebrate him as the greatest basketball player of all time? You're going to be recorded with the answer on this one.
I don't know. Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't think we're saying anything about his. It's kind of an interesting question. I don't know. I never thought about that. I mean, I would have no problem with that.
Just like so many people we celebrate, we don't know. We may celebrate, this great quarterback who's the biggest adulterer in the world, but we're like, he is the best quarterback. We love our quarterback, or we love our baseball player, but it's like we salute him. He's won us a World Series, but he's also the biggest. Yeah. Okay. Keep going. Right. Keep going.
Here's a good one. How do I behave at work if I'm being forced to support LGBTQ issues? The reason I included this one in here is I just know a lot of people that come to my church. They've had they work for corporations, and there's the whole something's happening where they're being asked to sign something.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just say a very uncomfortable thing. Don't sign things that you don't believe to be true. To be honest with you guys,
you've been honest with us the whole time, though, right?
I've been honest the whole time.
Please, yes.
I'm thinking of around the globe. Christians have had to deal with this kind of stuff for a long time. I remember when I was in Turkey a while ago, just talking to guys who, they're in the workplace and they're being asked to say something in their workplace to have a job promotion or something like that, and they couldn't do it, and they end up losing their job. I'm not telling you to lose your job, but I am telling you, don't say I believe in something when you don't believe in it. I don't know what that's going to cost you, and I don't presume to think that's easy to do or anything like that. You have jobs you've worked for, I get it. But this is kind of the reality. This is floating through, and if you're not affirming, meaning it's not just, everyone can go their own way, but for a lot of corporations, it has kind of become, if you're not affirming, and if you don't sign that you're affirming, there can be harm to your career path. I think you really have to pray over that. And I would suggest don't sign things that you really don't believe to be true. It's a weird world we're in right now that's taking place, but that's my advice to you.
And take that last one, and we got one in the box. And if anyone else has one in the box, I put it in the box right now. But let's take that last one quickly, Ray, so we can get.
Yeah. How do I help my children navigate new school curriculum? Even talking about this topic. This is a toughie. So I got a 6-year-old and 2 4-year-olds, and last year we were watching Wheel of Fortune after dinner, and Pat Sajak brings the winner up and says, "Who do you have in the audience with you?" And the guy said, "Oh, I've got my husband." And Ruthie was 5 years old at the time, and Ruthie looks over at me and says, "He has a husband?" And so we had to answer the question. And the way we addressed it at that point with Ruth, and we're very clear with Ruth, and we try to teach Ruth good theology and what's appropriate for her and how she can handle it. But we just said, Ruthie, in this household, we choose to love and honor Jesus Christ. And we believe that because we love and honor Jesus, he's told us that men should marry women and women should marry men, but not everyone chooses to love and honor Jesus Christ. And there's a lot of people, this has served us for a lot of questions, by the way. So parenting tip, we learned this from another couple who's older than us. But not everybody chooses to love and honor Jesus Christ. And some families do things differently than we do. And we need to love them as well. But in our family, Jesus comes first and we listen to his word. And so that's given us a lot of grace to answer a lot of questions for her. Our kids can handle more than you think. And if you're in the public school system, they're going to be being taught the opposite of what the Bible says pretty much from kindergarten up at this point. And so you will need to educate your children on your own and present the Christian worldview to them and prepare them to go into their classrooms. Because the Illinois public school system now in kindergarten, they're getting a full dosage of this. So you need to be equipped at that age to be able to handle that conversation with them. But again, your church can come around you. There's a lot of good resources, but your kids can handle it and teach them that you as Christians love and honor Jesus Christ.
Why don't you take a question in the box there? If you are not in a marriage covenant, should you confess your sin to your girlfriend or boyfriend, fiance? I've been told both, to hold that only for marriage or to confess because actions impact the other person. I wonder if it's your confess your sins that you've done against that person. You're just talking in general, Myra. Are you talking? I'm thinking you're talking in general. You're not talking like if you're not saying like if a boyfriend curses by says a swear word to his girlfriend, obviously it would be more of a personal. So she's saying more of a personal sin, like forget the boyfriend or girlfriend. It's something they did at work. It's something they did on their own in the privacy of their own home.
Yeah.
What's your thought?
Man, I'm sorry for leaning on wisdom on this one, but I think that there is wisdom. I've been handling a lot of kind of wisdom relational questions recently. What I would say is I think there is an appropriate time in the dating relationship as you're moving closer towards it getting pretty serious. If I'm just making up a scenario right now, if you're in a dating relationship and you're struggling with pornography and you haven't told your girlfriend that or your boyfriend that, and you're kind of getting to a place where it's like, wow, like we might kind of getting close to marriage or engagement. I think there is wisdom in having a conversation and letting that person in on that. Probably not overly details, right? Because there's some details that aren't necessary at that point. You want to go too much information. But I think letting them into that would be good because honestly, you don't know. That could cause scars later on if you don't kind of share that up front. There's a lot of wisdom in there and prayer as well. Joe, I hope I'm not giving advice that you wouldn't give.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would just add if it was more of, let's say the guy was blowing up at work and he just couldn't control his temper at work, he should have a man in his life that he's confessing that to. He should not
Yes.
I'm just going to go to my girl or vice versa. That is not healthy in a dating. That should be like, I have a brother in my life, a man and then that's how he should be going. It should not, if he's not going to another man or the woman was not going to another woman, that's saying something unhealthy about their community where they're not, that's men to men, woman to woman. So yeah, what Rafe said, yes, on that topic, but if it's more of a general thing, personal sin, that woman needs to have woman in her life or that man needs to have men in his life. And if they don't, that needs to be changed. So what else? Okay, one more. Ali Benware, Ari, being forced to support LGBTQ work, would you say that there is a difference between outright supporting someone's actions versus supporting the fact that all people should have an equal right to fair treatment and employment at work regardless of their sexuality? Would you say there's a difference between outright supporting? Yeah, versus supporting the fact. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is where the details are tricky.
Yeah, maybe murky.
It depends what the statement is. And the reason I put that question in there is just because honestly, so many people have asked me this question over the last couple of years. And so I know every company has their own statement. So this one, if the statement is not, I'm just imagining this statement right now. It's not affirming the LGBTQ lifestyle, but it is basically trying to affirm the dignity and value of every human being. And that there shouldn't be discrimination based on sexuality in the workplace. Off the top of my head, I think that seems fine. That's kind of what I was saying before when I said yes and no. Do we affirm that every person is made in the image of God and is worthy of love, and we should care for all people? Of course, yes. Very rarely have I heard of a statement that usually a statement goes a little further than that, but that would be my initial response. I might need to think about that more, but that's my initial response.
I think I would generally, in regards to what she's saying, with regards to that, with regards to the fact that you have an equal right to fair treatment and employment, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, of course. I would say, yeah, you would not say there should be unfair treatment for someone. No. And who could become the president of this group? Of course, anyone at whatever company you work for has a role to do and there's a calling on that. Absolutely. Absolutely. What else? Any more? You could ask it. You could unmic yourself and ask it. Going once. Going twice. We got one more time. Steven's got one. Steven's got one. South Loop.
I'll do it. Yeah, Rafe, I'm curious how exactly you did answer that question that you talked about with the guys you met at Millennium Park. So can you give just like a 30-second role play of like how you answered that question or would answer that question in that scenario?
That was last summer. But usually when I get to a question of morality, one of the tricks Jesus did when he did apologetics and discussion with people was he always put the bigger question back on them. And that's something I try to do in apologetics and in evangelism with people. So they're asking me a question about my view of the line of sexual immorality. And my aim at that point would be to put it back on them and have them answer the question. So basically, I'm guessing I did something where I said, well, I'd love to answer that. And I have a really good answer for you. I would want to respond. But can I just ask you first? Like, how do you determine what is sexually moral and immoral? Like, everyone has lines somewhere, and how do you determine your lines? Sometimes it's kind of a cheap out because it makes them think, but actually what ends up happening is they realize that they're about to affirm that they also have drawn lines. They just chose to put them in a different place than you did, and they're not as open as they'd like to think they are. So that's how I usually go about that.
Rafe, I already got one of my guys in this call ready to come to a Millennium Park with us. So
good.
Once we get a little nice weather in the pandemic, we got at least one.
Summer of evangelism. I'm telling you, hearts are ready right now. Hearts have been softened by all this.
Is marriage equally blessed inside and outside of Christianity in the eyes of God? Is marriage equally blessed? So I think in that case, the question there is marriage between a man and a woman. So a Buddhist couple versus, or an atheist, let's say an atheist couple, Buddhist couple, versus versus two people that are professing believers. You and Sarah, when you got married, versus, I think that's what they're saying, Danielle and Ryan. Versus
the word blessed is tricky there. And so in terms of we believe that marriage has been given as a gift of common grace to all humanity. So a Hindu couple who's a man and a woman who get married, Buddhist couple, Jewish couple, two atheists, man and woman get married. Is that a real marriage in the eyes of God? Yes, we would affirm that. Is it blessed in the sense of they're realizing the fullness of what marriage was designed to do, pointing towards our Trinitarian God and Jesus' death and resurrection on the cross? Well, no, because they're not recognizing it in that way. And so there's, frankly, what I would just say, blessing that comes from, right? Blessed are the poor in spirit, those who recognize their dependence of a Savior. That's the Beatitudes. We're in that series right now. And so a Hindu couple who's married, is it a legitimate marriage? Of course, yes. It's a man and a woman. They've gotten married before God, and he's given that to all mankind. But are they receiving the Beatitude blessings? No, they're not receiving that. Is it a marriage that has the potential to become a God-honoring marriage in the sense of pointing towards Jesus? Yes. So if both of them came to faith in Jesus one day, they don't need, it's right, if they came to Jesus one day, they wouldn't have to get divorced or something like that. The marriage will work.
The marriage can be redeemed.
The marriage can be redeemed.
So a gay marriage can never be redeemed, right? I've heard it said once, what if my gay friend is in a marriage and he just came to Christ? Does God want him to honor the marriage covenant he's made? You would say, no. They were never, like Rafe said in the beginning, they were never married in God's eyes. So there's no, they may have to get a divorce from the state legally, but there would be no such thing as he's committed to this marriage, because it was, in God's eyes, it was never a marriage. It was never redeemable. Like Rafe just said, a Buddhist marriage, an atheist marriage, that can still be redeemable, but there is a common grace because God did create it. Yeah. So. Yeah.
If you want a good one, I remember I had to write a paper for seminary. This was a long time ago that said, imagine you're a missionary who goes to a polytheistic culture where a man is married to a number of women and has children with all of them. And then they come to faith in Jesus. What do you tell them to do? Now that's a brain twister.
That's a brain okay, one more.
There you go.
Is heterosexual marriage sinful outside of Christianity? And does it count if one of those two people is a Christian and the other is not? Is heterosexual marriage sinful outside of Christianity? I think the quick answer to that is no. And
no, it's not sinful.
And does it count if one of those two people is a Christian and the other is not?
Yeah. And so, what is it? 1 Corinthians 5, Joe?
Equally yoked.
Yeah.
5 or 6. 5
or 6, where it says to the married woman who's married to an unbelieving husband. I think it's 1 Corinthians 5. Basically, it's Paul's advice to a Christian woman who's married to an unbelieving husband, and it says stay married, because basically it says the husband is made holy for you, and the children are made holy because of you. And the idea there is not that the children are saved because of you or that the husband is saved because of you, but the idea is that that husband is experiencing the presence of the Holy Spirit in their house because of you in their life. And there's great hope for that person to put their faith in Jesus Christ as you witness to them. And same thing with your child. So, even just one believing parent in a child's life can have great impact to see that child come to know faith in Jesus Christ. 1 Corinthians 7, it looks like right there.
Yeah.
And so that's the Bible speaks to that directly.
Wonderful. Well, Rafe, I think I speak for everyone. Thank you so much for pouring yourself into this material, for coming up with it. We're really grateful. You've blessed us. And please don't hesitate. Obviously, most of y'all have my email, and be happy to follow up, have conversations. And it'd be really, really, really a joy if I could do that in any way, shape, or form. So we have 2 more classes left: complementarianism next week, and then end times, eschatology in 2 weeks. So Rafe, thank you. And let me pray, and then we'll end the call. So Lord, thanks for tonight. And thanks for all these folks from all over the country tuning in and desiring to be equipped, to be challenged, to go to the word ultimately. Father God, I pray we'd all be men and women who go to your word, seek what's, let our conviction be driven by what we believe the Bible teaches, and maybe just keep going back and digging into scripture. So would you make your face shine upon each one of us, as most of us will be going to sleep here tonight. We pray we would all be able to lie down and sleep in peace, because you are God, and you're in control of the universe. You're in control of coronavirus. You're in control of our jobs and our health, and we're not ultimate. You are. And so we rest in the sovereign hands of a loving and good God, who's working all things for good for those who love him. So bless our marriages on this call. Bless our singleness on this call, those who are engaged. Thank you so much. We all have, like we said, the ground beneath the cross is level. So keep us ever dependent and humble before you. And we pray all this in Christ's name. Amen. Amen. Thanks, everybody. I see you all.
All right. Good to see everybody.
Cam, are you going to hang out with Allie, do the Arizona thing? I mean, you guys are in Arizona. You guys hanging out? Oh, that's so funny. They're hanging out in Arizona together. Isn't that?
We're here
Oh,
at our parents' house.
That's too cute. Wheaton College represented.
That's not a social distance, Cam.
Wheaton College won the contest. Most alumni.
I'm surrounded by Wheaties here.
I know. Well, peace be
But
with
at home too.
Yo,
So.
we got a lot of Northwestern. We got some cats here.
We got some cats. Mike wasn't on the call, but we have Ryan.
I've been sitting here the whole time.
I didn't see you. We got 4 Wheaton College and 4 Northwestern.
Oh, cats. Yeah, we're
We
representing.
got more. Armin 5. Okay, maybe Wheaton. Sorry.
I got my.
Let's
go.
We got 2 Gators. We got 3 Gators. No, we have 2 Gators. Me and Sean. We got a boiler up.
Go
we got
Gators.
in college. William went to Oklahoma. Got an Oklahoman, SMU. Tiffany went to, I always want to say Michigan State, but you didn't go to Michigan State. You went to another school in Michigan, like not Grand Valley, but
No, I went to school in Cincinnati.
Okay, close. Danielle went to like Bates in Maine. Ryan went to like, I don't know, something. It's called Ale, I think. Ale University, something like that. Joanna, Michigan. I know where everyone went to school. Wow.
Yeah, that's good.
Michaela, A&M. Amanda, the Indiana University. Brooke, I don't know where Brooke went. Brooke. Wait, Brooke. I don't know. Are you a Gator, Brooke?
No, I went to Baylor.
Baylor, represent. Matt, Whedon, Rachel Whedon, Diane, Illinois.
No, UW-Madison.
UW-Madison.
Badger.
Right.
Badger.
And then Cam went to the DePaul University. We already
The
said
DePaul.
Wheaton, and then Chad went to Southern Methodist University. I know my colleges, baby. Grant went to Boiler Up. And then Joanna, you went Michigan undergrad, right?
Yeah, here you go.
Then where'd you go to medical school?
Here, Rush.
Oh, Rush, okay. Well, blessings, everybody. Have a good night. I'm going to end it, okay?
All right.
Yes.
All right. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Joe.
Thanks.